There comes a season in your life when God does not explain himself, he shifts you. You reach for what used to hold you and it's not there anymore. You pray the same prayers, lean on the same supports, depend on the same people, the same patterns, the same comforts, but suddenly they no longer satisfy. Not because God is punishing you, not because you failed, but because heaven has decided that what once sustained you can no longer contain you. God is winning you. Just like a child who cries when the milk is removed, you may feel confused, frustrated, even abandoned. But what feels like loss is actually preparation. What feels like withdrawal is divine development. God is breaking your dependence on what was temporary so he can introduce you to what is eternal. If you're in a season where what used to work no longer works, where what used to feed you no longer fills you, this message is for you. Because God is not taking something away to hurt you, he's removing it to grow you. There's a principle in the life of every believer, in the life of every follower of God, that is as sure as the rising sun and as certain as the changing seasons. And that principle is this: God removes before he replaces. It is not something designed to break you. It is not some cruel test to make you suffer unnecessarily, and it is not a punishment for your mistakes, though it may feel like that at times. It is the divine order of development, the sacred process through which God positions you for something greater than you could ever attain on your own. You see, God does not put new wine into old wineskins. He does not pour fresh oil into containers that are cracked, brittle, or leaking. There comes a point when the Lord looks at your life and says, this thing you are leaning on, this thing you are holding for security, this thing you have trusted for sustenance, this must go. And when it leaves, it is not to leave you empty. It is to prepare a space where he can fill you with something new, something better, something bigger than you ever imagined. When God removes, it is almost always preceded by a season of reliance. You have leaned on people. You have leaned on routines. You have leaned on circumstances. And sometimes you have even leaned on things that seem harmless, but have subtly shaped the trajectory of your life. They may have been good. They may have even been necessary at one time. But God sees a horizon beyond where they can take you. He sees potential in you that cannot be realized as long as you remain dependent on what is familiar, what is comfortable, what is convenient. And so, he moves. It may begin gently, almost imperceptibly, like a door closing quietly behind you, or it may come with a sudden jolt. A moment of clarity that forces you to confront the reality that what you relied on can no longer sustain you. Either way, the principle remains. Before God replaces, he removes. The removal is never random. It is intentional. It is purposeful. And it is designed to awaken something in you that you may not even realize is dormant. You may not understand in the moment why a friend disappears, why a job ends, why a relationship falls apart, or why a habit that you counted on for comfort is suddenly unavailable. You may cry out, you may plead, you may wonder what you did wrong. But the truth is, God is orchestrating a divine exchange. He is removing the temporary to make way for the eternal, the limited to make way for the limitless, the small to make way for the supernatural. He is not taking lightly what he has removed, and he is not removing what is truly essential. He is removing what has become a crutch so that you will learn to walk in his strength, not yours. He is removing what is finite so that you can embrace what is infinite. Think about it. When a farmer plants seeds, he does not leave them in the original packet forever. He removes them from that small space and places them into soil, into an environment where they can grow, stretch, and flourish. The seed cannot remain dependent on the paper bag that carried it. It must be transplanted. It must endure a season of darkness in the soil. before it can reach the sunlight and bear fruit. In the same way, God removes what you have been holding on to so that you can be transplanted into the fertile ground of His provision, His purpose, His promise. The process may be uncomfortable. It may require patience, faith, and perseverance. But the end result is always greater than the pain of the moment. God. Removal also reveals the depth of your dependence. Sometimes we do not realize how much we lean on certain things until they are no longer available. It is easy to rely on external sources of strength, approval, or security, but when they are stripped away, we are forced to confront the reality that true strength comes from God alone. This is not punishment, it is preparation. It is the refining fire of faith. When the familiar is taken away, we are invited to look upward, to reach beyond what we can see, to trust in the invisible hand of God that is working all things together for our good. We discover that what we thought we needed to survive, what we clung to for comfort, is nothing compared to what God has prepared for us when we finally learn to walk fully in His provision. There is also a spiritual dimension to this removal. God is not only shaping your circumstances, He is shaping your character. When He removes, He is testing, stretching, and strengthening you. He is creating in you a resilience that will serve you for the rest of your life. He is cultivating patience, humility, and faith. Every time something you once depended on disappears, it is an opportunity to discover that your ultimate dependency is not on things, people, or even your own abilities. It is on God Himself. When you finally grasp this, when you finally release your grip on what is fading, you open yourself to receive what is lasting, eternal, overflowing. The replacement often comes in forms we do not expect. It may not be immediate. It may not arrive according to our timetable, but God is faithful. He does not remove without a purpose, and He does not leave a vacuum. The space He creates is sacred, and it is intended for something far greater than what we could have held on to before. This is why patience is key. This is why faith must be cultivated. Because the replacement is not simply a substitute, it is an upgrade. God is always about elevation, enhancement, and expansion. The old served its purpose, but the new is designed to propel you into a season of supernatural increased fulfillment and glory that could never have been attained without first letting go of what was holding you back. You must understand that God's removal is also a message of hope. It is a declaration that your life is not stuck, that your future is not limited by your present circumstances, that your worth is not defined by what you have lost. Every removal carries within it the seed of replacement. Every loss is a divine appointment in disguise. Every season of emptiness is a precursor to overflow. What God removes today, He will replace with something that not only meets your needs, but exceeds your expectations. You may not see it now, you may not feel it now, but if you will trust Him, if you will be patient, if you will walk in obedience, the replacement is already on its way. The key is to surrender. The key is to let go of control, to release the grip on what you thought you needed, and to embrace the uncertainty with faith. It is not easy. Our human nature resists removal. We fight, we cling, we bargain, we complain, but faith requires release. Faith requires trust. Faith requires believing that God is always working on our behalf, even when circumstances suggest otherwise. When we surrender what we are holding on to, when we allow God to remove it, we are stepping into a higher level of intimacy with Him. We are acknowledging that He knows what is best, that His plans are greater than ours, and that His timing is perfect. Remember, God removes before He replaces, because He wants you to experience the fullness of His provision. He wants you to walk in freedom, not bondage. He wants you to operate from a place of dependence on Him, not on temporary crutches. He wants to prepare you for a destiny that is bigger than your comfort zone, greater than your current understanding, and richer than anything you could have imagined. When God removes, it is never the end. It is the beginning of a new chapter, a new level, a new dimension of life. When He finally places the replacement in your hands, it will be a testimony, a miracle, a tangible proof that what was taken was never lost, but merely reserved for something greater. So, if you are in a season where God is removing, do not despair. Do not fight the process. Do not cling to what is fading. Instead, lift your eyes, steady your heart, and trust in the divine principle that God removes before He replaces. Know that every loss is preparing you for a greater gain. Every empty space is making room for something full. Every season of withdrawal is a prelude to supernatural abundance. God is not taking away to harm you. He is removing to elevate you. He is clearing the old so He can reveal the new. He is teaching you to depend on Him, to trust Him, to walk in faith, and to embrace the blessings that are already on their way. And when the replacement comes, it will not merely restore what was lost. It will surpass it, expand it, and establish you in a level of provision, purpose, and power that you never thought possible. Comfort is one of those things that feels safe, that feels good, that feels necessary, but what we often fail to recognize is that comfort, when it becomes a constant, can also become a ceiling. It can hold you back. It can limit your vision. It can confine your destiny. Many times, God allows us to enjoy comfort for a season, not to imprison us in it, but to teach us how to recognize it, how to appreciate it, and ultimately, how to transcend it. Comfort can soothe the soul, but if you cling to it too long, it can dull your hunger for what God has for you. It can keep you from stepping into the fullness of your calling. It can make you settle for what is familiar instead of stretching you toward what is divine. Comfort is not inherently bad. It is natural to desire ease, to desire rest, to desire a place where you feel secure. But when that desire begins to dictate your choices, when it begins to define your actions, when it begins to govern your decisions, it becomes a ceiling, and ceilings were never meant to be permanent. God did not create you to stay under the roof of your own limitations, and yet, how often we make our comfort zone the highest point we are willing to reach. Many people never realize they are living under a ceiling because comfort disguises itself as security. We tell ourselves, this is good enough, this is safe enough, this is comfortable enough, and we settle. And while settling may feel responsible, it may feel wise, it may even feel spiritually prudent, the truth is that settling is a form of stagnation. God's best is always just beyond the ceiling of your comfort. And He knows that if you never push past the familiar, you will never experience the extraordinary. God did not create you to live within the constraints of what you already know, what you already understand, or what you already control. He created you to expand, to grow, to push past the limits that your own comfort imposes. Comfort can lull you into complacency. Comfort can whisper lies into your ear. You are doing enough. You are safe enough. You are good enough. And while those words may soothe for a moment, they steal your potential. They rob you of your destiny. And they prevent you from stepping into the purpose for which you were born. Think about it, some of the greatest movements in history, some of the greatest breakthroughs in life did not come from comfort, they came from challenge. They came from discomfort. They came from a place where the familiar was stripped away and something new had to be forged. Abraham had to leave the comfort of his homeland. Moses had to leave the comfort of the palace. David had to leave the comfort of the shepherd's field. Esther had to leave the comfort of anonymity, and each one of them had to endure a season of uncertainty, a season of stretching, a season of discomfort, in order to step into the fullness of God's plan. Comfort is not inherently opposed to God, but if it becomes the measure of your satisfaction, if it becomes the standard of your living, if it becomes the defining factor of your life, then it becomes a ceiling. And ceilings are not God's design. God's design is expansion, elevation, increase, and abundance. God's design is never for you to stay under a roof that you outgrow. But too often we cling to what feels good instead of pursuing what is promised. Comfort can also be deceptive. It can make you think that what you have is sufficient when it is not. It can make you complacent when God is calling you to action. It can create a false sense of security that prevents you from recognizing opportunities. Many times, people are passed over for promotion, overlooked for blessing, and bypassed for purpose, not because God is withholding, but because they are unwilling to move beyond the ceiling of their own comfort. They are afraid to leave what is familiar. They are afraid to stretch. They are afraid to risk. Comfort tells you that it is safe to stay where you are, and yet God is whispering that He has something bigger, something better, something beyond what you can see. Comfort can be the prison disguised as a palace. You may think you are thriving, but you are simply surviving under the roof of your own limitations. God wants to remove that ceiling. He wants to take you to heights you never imagined. But in order for that to happen, you must be willing to step out of comfort, to embrace the unknown, and to trust Him in the space where safety feels absent but opportunity abounds. There's also a spiritual danger to comfort. Spiritually, comfort can deaden the senses. It can make you less sensitive to God's leading. When you are too comfortable, you may stop praying with urgency, stop worshiping with passion, and stop pursuing God with intensity. Comfort can lull you into spiritual complacency, and complacency is the enemy of destiny. God wants you alert, awake, and responsive. But comfort can sedate the soul. Comfort can trick you into thinking that you are where you need to be, when in reality, God is calling you to climb higher. God does not need you to be comfortable. He needs you to be faithful, courageous, and obedient. Comfort may feel good for the moment, but it is rarely the path to greatness. God often removes comfort, not as a punishment, but as an invitation. An invitation to grow, to stretch, to pursue the promises that are beyond your current capacity. Comfort is temporary. Purpose is eternal. If you remain under the ceiling of comfort, you may miss the miracle that is waiting just beyond it. Breaking through comfort requires courage. It requires faith. It requires a willingness to trust God, even when you cannot see the whole path. It requires stepping into uncertainty with the assurance that He who called you is faithful. It may involve leaving a job that pays well, but does not fulfill you. It may involve leaving a relationship that feels easy, but is not aligned with your destiny. It may involve taking risks, learning new skills, or embracing challenges that feel uncomfortable. But every time you move beyond comfort, every time you refuse to let the familiar define you, you are stepping closer to the life God has prepared for you. Every time you push past the ceiling, you discover new strengths, new insights, new capacities that you did not know existed. God did not design comfort to confine you. He designed it to prepare you, but preparation must give way to action. Preparation must give way to faith. Preparation must give way to obedience. Comfort can be the ceiling, but faith can be the ladder. Remember, comfort is not your enemy. It is a tool, a stepping stone, a preparation. It is not meant to hold you down forever. It is meant to sustain you while you grow, while you develop, while you prepare to move into what God has for you. But when you cling to it too long, when you make it your standard, when you refuse to move beyond it, comfort becomes a ceiling, and ceilings are meant to be broken. God does not call you to live in ceilings. He calls you to live in expansion and increase and abundance and in purpose. He calls you to step into challenges, embrace uncertainty, and trust Him as you climb higher. Comfort can feel safe, but destiny demands risk. Comfort can feel easy, but greatness requires effort. Comfort can feel sufficient, but God, as best, is always just beyond it. So if you feel a sense of dissatisfaction, if you feel a gentle nudge, if you sense that God is asking you to step out, do not resist. That feeling is Him calling you to break through the ceiling. That discomfort is not a sign of failure, it is a sign of growth. That unrest is the whisper of promise, telling you that something greater awaits. God does not want you to stay under the roof of your comfort. He wants you to soar above it. He wants you to discover your capacity, your calling, and your potential. He wants to show you that what feels safe is not always sufficient, and what feels good is not always God as best. Comfort is not the enemy, but it can become the ceiling. And when you break through that ceiling, when you step into faith, obedience, and courage, you enter a realm of life, provision, and purpose that you could never have accessed by staying where you were. Breakthrough always begins when you move beyond comfort. Expansion always starts when you embrace the unknown. Destiny always manifests when you refuse to settle. God will never leave you under the ceiling of comfort forever, but He will call you to rise, to climb, and to experience the fullness of His plan. Your comfort may feel good, it may feel safe, it may feel satisfying, but it was never meant to be permanent. God wants to lift you, elevate you, and take you to heights you never imagined. Step out, step up, and trust Him. The ceiling is breaking, and the space beyond it is waiting for you. There is a divine principle at work in your life that you cannot ignore. A spiritual law that governs the journey from where you are to where God wants you to be. That principle is this: dependence shifts before purpose unfolds. Before God can release you into your destiny, before He can open the doors of favor and promotion, before He can hand you the assignment that will define your life, He must first rearrange your dependencies. You see, the way you function today is built around certain supports, certain crutches, certain routines, certain people, and certain comforts. And many of those supports are not bad. They may have been necessary for the season you have just walked through, but God is a God of seasons, a God of progression, a God of elevation. He knows that the very things you have leaned on so heavily may not be able to carry you into the next phase of your calling. And that is why He begins to shift your dependence. Dependence is not just about what you rely on materially, though it can be. It is not just about your finances, your career, your relationships, or your resources. Dependence is also spiritual, emotional, and mental. It is the way you navigate life, the way you make decisions, the way you measure security, and the way you anchor hope. God may begin to shift your dependence in subtle ways. He may remove a job, close a door, redirect a relationship, or make a season of scarcity appear where abundance once flowed. It may feel confusing. It may feel unfair. It may feel like He has abandoned you. But this is the sacred work of realignment. This is the divine recalibration that must occur before purpose unfolds. You cannot fully embrace your calling while you are still leaning on what will not sustain you in the season ahead. Think about the story of Joseph. Joseph depended on his family as love, but that dependence shifted when he was betrayed by his brothers. He depended on his freedom, but that dependence shifted when he was thrown into a pit. He depended on his innocence, but that dependence shifted when he was falsely accused and thrown into prison. And yet, every shift in dependence, every removal, every betrayal, and every hardship prepared him for the unfolding of his purpose. Before he could sit at Pharaoh's table, before he could save nations from famine, before he could be elevated to the highest seat of influence in Egypt, Joseph had to learn to depend on God alone. He had to learn that human resources, human loyalty, and human favor are temporary, but divine provision, divine timing, and divine wisdom are eternal. Dependence shifts because God wants to cultivate a deeper faith within you. It is easy to trust God when life is smooth, when resources are abundant, when relationships are favorable, when doors open effortlessly. But faith is proven, faith is strengthened, faith is matured in the absence of the familiar. God shifts dependence to teach you reliance, not resignation. to teach you patience, not panic, to teach you trust, not fear. When he begins to withdraw the things you have leaned on, he is not abandoning you, he is redirecting you. He is saying, I want you to see that your purpose is not dependent on circumstances. Your destiny is not anchored in human hands. Your breakthrough will not come from what you used to rely on, but from me. There's also a practical dimension to this shift. God cannot allow you to fully occupy the space of your purpose if your mind, your heart, and your energy are still invested in the old dependencies. Imagine trying to move into a new house while still carrying furniture from the old one. The clutter prevents full occupancy. Baggage hinders movement. The weight slows your steps. And yet, when you allow God to shift your dependence, when you allow him to remove what is no longer essential, you create space for the new assignment, the new responsibility, and the new destiny. Your capacity expands, your vision clears, your focus sharpens, and suddenly you are ready to embrace purpose in ways you could not before. Dependence shifts are also a call to courage. It takes bravery to release what has held you. It takes humility to admit that what you thought was secure is no longer enough. It takes faith to trust that God, who orchestrated the shift, also orchestrates the solution. You may feel anxious. You may feel uncertain. You may feel the temptation to return to the old patterns, to reach back for the familiar, to cling to what has been taken away. But the moment you resist the shift is the moment you stall the unfolding of purpose. Your dependence must change before purpose can manifest. You cannot step into a leadership role, a calling, or a destiny designed by God while clinging to the supports of yesterday. The old cannot hold the weight of what is coming. The old cannot carry the glory that is about to be revealed. The old cannot sustain the assignments God is preparing for you. Spiritual dependence shifts are particularly significant. God may withdraw certain comforts, certain routines, certain supports, or even certain spiritual practices that were once sufficient. He may allow you to feel alone, to feel tested, to feel stretched, to feel like you are in uncharted territory. This is not punishment, it is preparation. God wants you to learn to seek him for everything, to trust him for every need, to rely on him for every decision. Dependent. Shifts teach you intimacy with God, because when the familiar is removed, there's no option but to look to the one who never changes, never fails, and never abandons. Your purpose cannot unfold fully if your trust is divided. It cannot emerge fully if your faith is superficial. It cannot manifest fully if your reliance is misplaced. God shifts dependence to secure alignment with his plan to guarantee that your purpose unfolds on a foundation that will never falter. Consider the disciples. They depended on their nets, their boats, their livelihoods. They depended on routines that were comfortable and predictable. But when Jesus called them, he shifted their dependence. He asked them to leave their nets, step out of the boat, and follow him into a mission that was uncertain, risky, and transformative. Their purpose, becoming fishers of men, carrying the message of salvation, could not unfold while they were still clinging to the old ways. The shift was uncomfortable. The shift was challenging. The shift required trust. But it was necessary. And the unfolding of purpose that followed changed the course of history. Dependence shifts also test patience. The timing may not align with your expectations. The new assignment may not arrive immediately. The old support may be removed before the replacement is revealed. But this is the season where your faith is strengthened, your endurance is cultivated, and your character is refined. You learn that God's timing is perfect, that his methods are deliberate, and that his plans are always for your ultimate good. The shift may feel destabilizing, but it is never destructive. It is always preparatory. It is always redemptive. It is always designed to position you for a higher level of purpose, a broader sphere of influence, and a deeper experience of God as presence and provision. Do not fear the shift. Do not resent the change. Do not grieve what is being removed, even if it feels precious. Instead, recognize it as a divine strategy. Dependence shifts are the fingerprints of God's guidance, the markers of His intentionality, the proof that He is orchestrating your life according to a plan that is bigger than you can comprehend. If you will trust Him through the removal, if you will embrace the shift instead of resisting it, if you will step forward in faith instead of clinging to the familiar, your purpose will begin to unfold with clarity, with power, and with precision. Ultimately, dependence shifts are about preparation for destiny. They are about aligning your resources, your focus, and your faith with the assignments that God has for you. They are about creating the capacity to receive, carry, and operate in the fullness of your calling. They are about training you to rely on God first, above all, so that when the purpose is revealed, you are ready to walk in it without hesitation, without distraction, without compromise. Your purpose cannot emerge while your dependence remains misplaced. Your destiny cannot manifest while your trust is divided. Your calling cannot be realized while you cling to what is no longer sufficient. God shifts dependence to clear the path for purpose, to open the doors that have been blocked, and to establish the platform on which you will stand. So if you find that life is rearranging itself, that doors are closing, that supports are being removed, and that old patterns are no longer effective, do not panic. Do not despair. Do not question the goodness of God. Instead, recognize that this is the sacred process of alignment. Dependence is shifting because purpose is about to unfold. Trust the shift. Embrace the change. Look to God as the ultimate source of provision, guidance, and strength. Allow Him to remove, redirect, and reposition. Knowing that every shift is intentional, every removal is purposeful, and every change is designed to lead you into the fullness of the destiny He has prepared. Dependence must shift before purpose unfolds, and when it does, your life will never be the same. You will step into a season of clarity, power, influence, and fulfillment that can only come from the hand of God. And the path to your purpose will be paved by the very shifts you once feared. There comes a time in life when what once fed you, what once sustained you, what once gave you strength and hope, can no longer do so. It may have been good for the season you were in. It may have carried you through trials. It may have been sufficient to meet the needs of yesterday, but today it is no longer adequate. God is calling you to recognize that what was once enough cannot carry you into the fullness of your destiny. It is not that God is taking away your blessing, not that He is punishing you, not that He is testing you for the sake of suffering. It is that He is preparing you for something greater, something more abundant, something that demands more of your faith, your strength, and your courage than what you once relied on. Life is seasonal. Circumstances are seasonal. And the tools, relationships, resources, and comforts that fed you then are not equipped to carry you into the new season that God is opening before you. Consider the stages of growth in a child. A newborn depends on milk, a simple, sustaining substance that nourishes and allows growth. But the child cannot remain on milk forever. There comes a time when the baby must transition to solid food, must learn to chew, must learn to digest more complex nutrients. What fed the infant is no longer enough for the growing child. And in the same way, God has provided for you in seasons past, but the very thing that nurtured you then will not suffice for the responsibilities, the opportunities, the trials, and the blessings that lie ahead. If you continue to rely on yesterday's provision, you will stagnate. If you cling to what once sustained you, you will never move forward. God is calling you to a higher level of faith, a greater depth of trust, and a broader understanding of His power. What worked then will not work now. And that is exactly the point. Often the realization that what once fed us cannot sustain us comes in uncomfortable ways. It may be a sudden loss, a shift in circumstances, a closing of doors, or a withdrawal of support. It may be subtle, almost imperceptible, a quiet whisper of dissatisfaction that something is no longer enough. It may be a glaring sign that you cannot ignore, a broken relationship, a failed opportunity, an unmet expectation. And while the discomfort may provoke fear, anxiety, or even anger, it is also a divine invitation to grow, to trust, and to move into a new season of dependence on God rather than old patterns. God's intention is never to leave you empty. His intention is to enlarge your capacity, to expand your vision, and to elevate your faith. The sustenance of yesterday is not designed to carry you today, and the lessons you learned then are stepping stones to the greater purpose He is unfolding now. Think about the story of Elijah. For a time, he was fed by the widow at Zarephath, a provision that sustained him in a critical season of famine. The jar of flour did not run out. The jug of oil did not fail. And for a while, it was sufficient. But God did not leave him in that place forever. There came a time when Elijah had to move, when the provision that had fed him no longer could carry him, when he had to trust God for a new source of sustenance. The miracle that carried him through one season could not carry him into the next. If Elijah had clung to what had worked before, he would have remained stagnant, unprepared, and unready for the greater assignment God had for him. And in the same way, God is calling you to release the things that fed you yesterday, to trust Him for what will sustain you tomorrow, and to recognize that the miracle that carried you through one season may not be sufficient for the challenges, responsibilities, and blessings of the next. There is also a spiritual dimension to this principle. What fed your faith yesterday may not be enough to sustain your faith today. What nourished your spirit, what inspired your prayers, what strengthened your hope may have reached its limit. God calls you to move beyond familiarity and comfort, to engage in deeper study, more fervent prayer, greater obedience, and more expansive vision. You cannot continue to rely on shallow waters when God is calling you to the depths. You cannot continue to consume spiritual milk when God is offering the solid food of His Word and presence. To remain content with what fed you then is to resist the growth God is orchestrating. What sustained you yesterday is a foundation, but not the ceiling. It is a starting point, but not the destination. God wants to deepen your faith, broaden your understanding, and strengthen your endurance, and that cannot happen if you insist on staying with what is no longer sufficient. The human tendency is to cling to what is familiar because it feels safe. We resist change because we fear the unknown. We depend on routines, relationships, and resources because they are predictable, and predictability gives the illusion of security. But the truth is, what fed you then may feel safe, but it is not sufficient for what God has called you to accomplish. The very things that kept you afloat in a storm may not carry you across the river that God is asking you to cross now. Comfort may feel satisfying, nostalgia may feel reassuring, but growth requires movement, and movement requires release. If you do not let go of yesterday's provision, you will not be ready to receive the abundance, the wisdom, the strength, and the purpose of today. Even Jesus modeled this principle. For 30 years, He was fed by the ordinary rhythms of life in Nazareth, sustained by family, community, and simple work. But when the time came for His ministry, the familiar could no longer sustain Him. He moved beyond the comfort of home, the predictability of routine, and the simplicity of the known into a season of miracles, purpose, and destiny that demanded more than what had fed him before. And the same is true for you. The God who brought you this far is calling you beyond the familiar, beyond yesterday's provision, beyond what has sustained you. He is calling you to a new level of faith, a new measure of obedience, and a new experience of His power. What fed you then cannot sustain you now. And if you resist that truth, you resist the fullness of His plan. Growth, purpose, and destiny always require new sustenance. God never intends for you to live in yesterday's provision, to survive on yesterday's miracles, or to operate in yesterday's resources. He intends for you to walk in the new, to thrive in the present, and to step boldly into the future. That may require sacrifice, patience, and faith. It may require letting go of what is familiar, releasing what is comfortable, and trusting Him in the unknown. But every step you take into the new, every move you make beyond yesterday's provision, every act of faith and reliance on God's unfolding plan, positions you to receive what will sustain you in the season ahead. The transition is rarely easy. Letting go of what once fed you can provoke fear, anxiety, and doubt. You may mourn the loss of what was sufficient. You may question God's timing, His wisdom, and His provision. You may feel as though you are being left empty. But remember, emptiness is often the prelude to fulfillment. Scarcity often precedes abundance. And loss often makes room for the next level of blessing. God does not call you to stay in yesterday's provision. He calls you to trust Him for today's, to prepare for tomorrow's, and to walk by faith rather than by sight. What fed you then was temporary, necessary, and valuable, but it was never meant to be permanent. Your faith, your strength, your vision, and your purpose demand more. And God is faithful to provide what is required for the new season. If you are feeling stretched, if you are feeling uncomfortable, if you are sensing that what once satisfied no longer does, take heart. It is a sign that God is working, that He is preparing you, that He is about to provide something greater. The shift is not a punishment, it is an opportunity. The withdrawal of old sustenance is a sign of divine preparation for the fullness of life that is ahead. Trust that God, who has carried you this far, will also carry you into the next season. The provision that fed you then served its purpose, but what sustains you now comes from the hand of a God whose plan is perfect, whose timing is precise, and whose power is unlimited. Do not cling to yesterday's sustenance. Do not settle for what no longer satisfies. Do not ignore the call to move forward. What fed you then cannot sustain you now. And the sooner you embrace that truth, the sooner you will experience the new provision, the greater strength, the deeper faith, and the higher level of purpose that God has prepared for you. Trust Him, step forward, release the familiar, and allow Him to feed you in ways you have never imagined. Your destiny requires it, your faith demands it. And your life will be transformed because you chose to believe that God is always faithful to provide exactly what you need for the season you are entering. There is a divine principle that every believer must understand if they are going to move from stagnation to purpose, from dependency to destiny, from childhood in faith to maturity in God. That principle is this: weaning precedes walking in maturity. There is a season in life when God begins to take away the things you have leaned on, the things you have depended upon, the things that have been familiar and comforting, not to harm you, not to punish you, not to abandon you, but to prepare you for growth, to prepare you for independence, to prepare you to walk in the fullness of His purpose. Just like a child must be weaned from milk before they can digest solid food, a believer must be weaned from temporary supports, from superficial comforts, and from patterns of dependence before they can walk in spiritual maturity. God's process is intentional and it is precise. It is designed to teach, to train, and to transform. Without weaning, maturity cannot come. Without preparation, independence cannot be achieved. Without the removal of what was once sufficient, growth cannot be sustained. Weaning is never comfortable. It is rarely convenient. It is often painful. The child cries when the bottle is taken away. The infant protests when the milk no longer comes. And in the same way, the human heart resists the removal of what has been familiar, what has been trusted, what has been counted on for sustenance. But pain is not the enemy. Discomfort is not the adversary. The purpose behind the removal is divine. God is orchestrating a transition from dependence to self-sufficiency in Him, from reliance on the temporary to trust in the eternal, from feeding on what is insufficient to feasting on what will sustain a lifetime of purpose. The weaning process is the moment when God begins to separate you from what you can handle on your own and begins to draw you closer to what only He can provide. It is not arbitrary. It is not cruel. It is necessary. Maturity required independence, and independence requires weaning. Think about every area of life where God has called you to greatness. Every season of responsibility, every position of influence, every role of leadership, every assignment of destiny requires that you stand on your own, not in arrogance, but in reliance on God alone. You cannot carry the weight of leadership if you are still dependent on old crutches. You cannot handle the authority God intends for you if you are still leaning on human validation. You cannot step into the fullness of your calling if you are still sustained by what was enough for yesterday but insufficient for today. The weaning process forces you to learn to walk with God as your source, your guide, your provider, and your strength. It forces you to rely on Him, not on your circumstances, not on people, not on familiar routines, not on comfort. Walking in maturity begins the moment you are willing to let go of what no longer sustains you and to embrace dependence on God alone. Consider the story of the Israelites in the wilderness. God delivered them from Egypt, providing manna from heaven, water from rocks, and guidance through pillars of cloud and fire. For 40 years He sustained them. But the wilderness was also a place of weaning. He gradually removed the old ways of dependence, the reliance on Egypt, the security of what was familiar, the structures they had known, and the Israelites were forced to learn to trust Him for everything. It was uncomfortable. It was challenging. It required obedience and faith. And the purpose was not punishment. It was preparation. God was teaching them how to walk in maturity, how to rely on Him fully, how to trust His timing, how to embrace His provision, and how to become a people capable of entering the promised land. Without the weaning, they could not inherit the fullness of what God had promised. Without the preparation, the maturity required to possess their destiny would not have been possible. Weaning is also about building resilience. Life will demand more of you than comfort can provide. Life will stretch you, challenge you, and sometimes even break you in order to remake you. God knows this, and He knows that you cannot thrive in the next season with the supports that suffice for the last. He begins to take away so that you can rise, to remove so that you can reach, to challenge so that you can grow. The moment you accept that the removal is not rejection, the moment you embrace that the discomfort is not defeat, the moment you understand that God's weaning is a preparation for maturity, you begin to move from surviving to thriving. You begin to understand that every trial, every loss, every removal is training, shaping, and equipping you for the responsibilities, the blessings, and the purpose that await. Maturity also requires discernment, and discernment cannot be cultivated without weaning. When what was familiar is removed, when what was relied upon is no longer sufficient, you are forced to look to God for clarity, guidance, and wisdom. You are forced to learn to make decisions in faith, to navigate life with His principles rather than human expectations, to hear His voice above the noise of comfort, familiarity, and ease. The weaning process teaches patience, teaches discernment, teaches endurance, teaches humility, and teaches a reliance on God that is deep, unshakable, and transformative. Without this process, Maturity remains shallow, decisions remain short-sighted, and purpose remains unrealized. Weaning prepares the heart, the mind, and the spirit to handle more than we could imagine, to walk in obedience that transcends convenience, and to trust in God when the path is unclear. Spiritual maturity cannot exist without the lessons of weaning. You cannot experience the depth of God's presence if you are still feeding on the shallow waters of yesterday's provision. You cannot walk in power if you are still sustained by temporary sources. You cannot embrace your calling if you are still dependent on the familiar. God allows the removal of supports, the withdrawal of comforts, the closing of doors, and the shifting of circumstances so that you may grow, so that you may learn, so that you may develop a capacity to sustain what He has planned for your life. It is a preparation that requires faith, patience, and obedience. It is a process that often feels uncomfortable, inconvenient, and even unfair, but the result is growth, maturity, and the ability to walk in the fullness of what God has called you to do. The weaning process also builds character. It develops endurance, shapes integrity, fosters resilience, and strengthens faith. Life will not always be easy, and the responsibilities God calls you to carry require strength that cannot be cultivated in comfort alone. Weaning forces you to stretch beyond what you thought possible, to rely on God more than ever, to trust Him even when the outcome is uncertain. It prepares you for the challenges that will inevitably come, the responsibilities that will require wisdom, the opportunities that will demand courage, and the influence that will require integrity. God does not wean lightly. He does not remove support arbitrarily. Every step of the process is deliberate, precise, and designed to ensure that you will walk in maturity and stand ready for your destiny. Even Jesus modeled this principle in His life. He was weaned from the comforts of Nazareth. He was prepared through prayer, fasting, and solitude. He was trained in obedience, and He was tested in ways that forced Him to rely fully on the Father. He did not step into ministry until He had been weaned from dependence on the ordinary, the familiar, and the temporary. His maturity was the result of preparation, discipline, and reliance on God alone. And the same is true for you. Your walk in maturity will only begin when you allow God to wean you from what has been holding you back, from what has sustained you, but is no longer sufficient, from what is familiar but not aligned with your next level of purpose. So if you find that life is uncomfortable, if you feel stretched, if the supports you have leaned on are being removed, do not despair. Do not resist the process. Do not mistake discomfort for rejection. God is weaning you so that you may walk in maturity. God is removing what is insufficient so that you may be strengthened for what is coming. God is preparing your mind, your heart, and your spirit to receive what only He can provide. Every moment of struggle, every season of loss, every step into the unknown is a step toward growth, a step toward independence, a step toward maturity. The weaning process is not punishment. It is preparation. It is not deprivation. It is development. It is the sacred process through which God shapes, trains, and equips you to walk in the fullness of your calling. When you embrace the process, when you trust God through the discomfort, when you release what is familiar, you begin to walk in a new level of strength, wisdom, courage, and faith. You begin to understand that life is not about clinging to what was, but about stepping into what God has prepared. You begin to realize that independence, maturity, and purpose are not optional. They are inevitable when you allow God to wean you from the temporary, the familiar, and the insufficient. Every removal, every shift, every challenge is a step closer to walking in maturity, standing in faith, and fulfilling your God-given destiny. Weaning precedes walking in maturity. It is the law of spiritual development, the principle of growth. and the divine process that transforms ordinary believers into extraordinary vessels. If you embrace it, trust it, and endure it, your life will never be the same. You will walk in purpose, operate in wisdom, lead with authority, and experience the fullness of God's plan. And you will finally understand that every discomfort, every removal, every challenge was not against you, but for you, shaping you, teaching you, and preparing you to walk in the maturity God has designed for your life. Now, as we come to the end of this message, I want you to hear something clearly, and with all the weight of heaven behind it, God is working in your life. Even when it feels like He's doing nothing. He is orchestrating seasons. He is shifting circumstances. He is redirecting paths, and He is pruning, removing, and weaning so that you can walk in the fullness of your destiny. If you have been shaken, if you have felt lost, if you have wondered why the things you used to rely on are no longer sufficient, understand this: every shift, every removal, every moment of discomfort is part of the divine process of preparation. God is not taking away to harm you. God is not withdrawing to abandon you. God is acting to align you, to elevate you, and to expand you. He is preparing your heart, your mind, your spirit, and your circumstances, so that when the next season arrives, you will be ready, not weak, not dependent, not unprepared, but strong, mature, equipped, and ready to carry the weight of purpose that only He can place in your hand. Think about everything we have talked about today. We started with the understanding that God removes before He replaces. That is not a threat, my friends. That is a promise. When God begins to take something away, it is because He has something far greater waiting for you. He is creating a space for blessing. He is preparing a platform for favor. He is clearing the way so that what comes next can not only meet your needs, but exceed every expectation you have ever held. And you must remember, what is coming will not fit into the old container. What God is preparing for you will not land in the space where yesterday's crutches, yesterday's supports, or yesterday's comfort held you. You must release, you must let go, you must trust Him, and you must be willing to receive. Then we saw that comfort can become a ceiling. There are things in your life that feel good, that feel safe, that feel familiar. But God is saying to you today that good is not enough. Safe is not enough. Familiar is not enough. There's a ceiling, a limit, a barrier, a constraint that has been holding you back from the next level. And the very thing that feels like security may be the very thing that is keeping you from walking in your purpose. God will call you to step beyond comfort. He will call you to stretch, to risk, to step out in faith, and to trust that His provision, His guidance, and His power are sufficient for the journey ahead. If you stay under the ceiling, you will never reach the heights He has for you. We learned that dependence shifts before purpose unfolds. God knows that in order for you to step into destiny, He must first shift the things you have been leaning on. He may remove people, resources, or circumstances that have carried you through the past season. He may make you feel vulnerable, stretched, or uncertain. That is not abandonment. That is divine preparation. Your purpose cannot be realized while your trust remains divided. Your calling cannot manifest fully while you are relying on yesterday's provision, yesterday's support, or yesterday's understanding. God shifts your dependence so that your foundation is firm in Him. So that when your purpose unfolds, you are not shaken, you are not unsteady, and you are not distracted by the temporary. And then we recognize that what fed you then cannot sustain you now. The very blessings, relationships, comforts, and resources that carried you through previous seasons are no longer adequate. They were designed for the season that has passed, but God is calling you into something new, something larger, something greater. You cannot step into the fullness of your calling by clinging to yesterday. Growth demands more. Purpose requires more. Destiny insists that you receive from God directly, trust Him fully, and allow Him to provide what is truly sufficient for the next stage. What worked before may have been miraculous, but the miracle for the next season is already waiting, and it requires your willingness to release the old and receive the new. Finally, we learned that weaning precedes walking in maturity. You cannot carry the responsibility of purpose without first being weaned from what you once relied upon. You cannot navigate the complexities of destiny if your dependence is misplaced. God allows certain things to be removed so that you may grow, so that you may mature, so that you may learn to walk in faith, courage, and obedience. Just like a child must be weaned to grow into adulthood, you must be weaned from yesterday's sustenance, yesterday's comfort, and yesterday's dependencies so that you can step fully into spiritual, emotional, and practical maturity. The process may feel uncomfortable, it may feel inconvenient, it may even feel painful, but it is preparing you to handle the next level of blessing, the next dimension of purpose, and the next season of your life. When you put all of these truths together, you see a pattern of divine preparation. God is never random in His actions. He is never careless in His timing. He is never indifferent to your future. Every shift, every removal, every weaning, every challenge, every season of discomfort is orchestrated with one purpose: to position you to walk in the fullness of your God-given destiny. And when you recognize this, when you embrace it, when you trust Him through the process, you will begin to see that what felt like loss is actually gain. What felt like abandonment is actually preparation. What felt like weakness is actually strength in the making. I want to speak to you today and declare over your life that your season of preparation is not wasted. Every tear, every trial, every moment of waiting is shaping you, refining you, and elevating you. You may not see the full picture. You may not understand the process. You may even question why certain things have been removed from your life, but God sees the end from the beginning, and He is faithful to bring every piece together. You are not behind. You are not forsaken. You are not missing out. You are being aligned, elevated, and prepared to receive more than you have ever imagined. Your destiny is not in danger. It is in development. Your purpose is not delayed. It is being perfected. Your life is not limited by yesterday. It is being liberated for tomorrow. So I want to challenge you today to do three things. First, release what God is asking you to release. Do not cling to yesterday's provision, comfort, or support. Let go and trust that His replacement is better than what you are leaving behind. Second, embrace the discomfort as part of the process. Do not fight the shifting of dependence, the closing of doors, or the seasons of uncertainty. These are the tools God is using to refine you, strengthen you, and position you for maturity. Third, step forward in faith, knowing that every shift, every removal, and every weaning is moving you closer to the purpose, the blessing, and the destiny God has designed for your life. Walk with confidence, walk with courage, walk with the assurance that what is coming is greater than what is past. I want you to hear me. Your best days are not behind you. Your miracles are not delayed forever. Your breakthrough is not lost. What God has for you is greater than what you have known. He is removing to replace. He is shifting to establish. He is weaning to mature. He is moving you from the familiar into the extraordinary. And the moment you choose to trust Him, the moment you choose to obey Him, the moment you choose to step into faith, the moment you choose to embrace the process, the fullness of your destiny will begin to unfold. So lift up your head, open your hands. Release what no longer serves you. Trust in what God is bringing. Step boldly into the unknown. Know that every removal has a purpose. Every shift has a plan. Every weaning has a lesson. And every season is orchestrated for your growth and your glory. Walk in maturity, walk in faith, walk in courage, and watch as God unfolds the life, the purpose, and the destiny that He has already designed for you. Your time is now. Your season is here. Your breakthrough is coming. Your God is faithful, and He will never fail you. Believe it, receive it, walk in it, and declare with me, I am ready, I am prepared, I am mature, I am released, I am walking in the fullness of my destiny. God has removed, God has shifted, God has weaned, and now I will walk in the life He has promised. Amen, amen, and amen.